Putting new discs on the disc sander can be a pretty big challenge, especially on larger surfaces like this. This is a 12-inch disc sander, but it's really nice to have that larger work area. But this sandpaper I got off and it has been well used. It was so bad that I could see the reflection of what I was sanding in the sandpaper. That's definitely not supposed to happen. I used a heat gun to heat up the adhesive and turned it a little bit less sticky, and it was a lot easier to take off. Now, obviously, it tore off into little pieces because at the beginning I forgot about the heat gun, but if you do it right, you can get it all to come off in one sheet. I can still feel some of that sticky residue on here. We don't want that because it kind of would hinder how well the sandpaper sticks, and it won't be perfectly flat. Just with the razor blade, and if we scrape this, you can see it is scraping some stuff there. We can run this around here and just try to scrape off as much as we can. You can see it definitely got some residue off. Just periodically spray some rubbing alcohol on the surface and then keep scraping. I got this sandpaper off of Amazon. It's 2 80 grit sheets. We got it for about $10, more like $12. There was other listings that were like a pack of 10 for $20, but after looking at reviews, a lot of them said they were too small, and I really want to go with a high quality sandpaper. You can get really cheap stuff and it won't grind very well. I think it's important just to get a good sandpaper. One of these sheets of 80 grit was about $6 a piece, and it comes with 2 in here. A lot of people will try to use lacquer thinner to get all of the residues off, but I've had some friends, they used lacquer thinner on the disc sander, and whenever they cleaned it off, they thought it was great, and then they stick the disc on, and the disc just goes flying off. So you want to be careful and try to avoid using different chemicals that have oils in them. I'm not sure if lacquer thinner actually has any oils in it, but whatever is in it, it really doesn't work well for cleaning this surface. On these Harbor Freight disc sanders or other similar companies, there's a rough casting around the edge, and it kind of sticks up like a lip. So on some other sanders, like in the picture here, you can see there's no guard on the edge of the sandpaper right here. That's super convenient because you can use the edge of the disc sander to sand corners. Right here you can't do that. But what we were able to do is just take a file and file that down, so now you can sand something that's bigger than 12 inches. Before, this was sticking up, and say you had a board, if you put it on there, the lip would keep it from touching the sandpaper. So even just a little bit of filing helps. Now the trick is getting the sandpaper on centered right in the center. There's several ways to put the sandpaper on. What I've always done is just take the back of the sandpaper and peel the adhesive all the way off. And then, now for the tricky part, if we put an arc in the sandpaper, it makes it a little bit easier to line up. Put one end down there, one end up here. This is always going to be the hardest part. It's getting it lined up around this edge. Without pushing down on it, right now I can still move this around. I haven't pushed down on it. And what I'm doing is I'll just adjust it. Looks like it needs to move over this way just a little bit. And then what you can do is spin it, and you can see it's high right here. So I'm just gonna lift it up a little bit, move it over this way a little bit. It's getting close right there, so I'm going to lift this up a little bit, move it over. It'd be nice if I could do that a little smoother. It's still getting a little close over here on this one edge, so that means I gotta move it over this way a little bit again. Once you press the sandpaper on, that's it. You can't adjust it anymore. So I want to make sure we're covering up all the edges of the sandpaper. Right here, it looks like it's not fully covering the disc. That's a no-no. We got to make sure the sandpaper is always fully covering that disc. Now that I've got this in line, I'm going to go ahead and start tapping it down. Now we're ready to put this all back together. And you can see there's a good amount of work that goes into replacing the belt on the disc sander. Now on the belt sander, it's a lot easier. You can just pull the belt on, pull the belt off, and it's super easy. So if you're doing a smaller part and you need to remove a lot of material, just go with the belt sander, hug away as much as you can, and then if you need that flat surface, you can come here to the disc sander. But it's good to have something that can remove most of that material so you can preserve the sandpaper on the disc sander. Now we'll tilt the sander back down. You can see some of the fluids that got caught pouring in right there. Now we'll wipe those fluids out of there. We don't need them in there. Now we'll take a clamp and clamp down the machine. With just this one clamp in here, this is really a lot more stable. It's almost like it's bolted down to the table. It doesn't move back and forth. It's really stable. Now we're going to go ahead and start assembling all these pieces back together. And put the screws in. Now we can tighten the screws. Now we'll put the fence on. Now we can put these screws on that hold the fence in place. Now we'll tighten that up. And on the other side. Now we'll put in the adjustment knob. This is also what tightens down on this and keeps the table from moving. It's very important to have 2 of these adjustment knobs on both sides of the table so you can adjust both sides, make sure both sides are perfectly square. The machinist square, we're going to check for square. Obviously right here and right here, but this is pretty bad. So if you look at it right here, the top of it is separating a little bit. So that means this side, just this side, needs to come up. So I'll tighten down on this side a little bit more, and then I'll just tap there. And now that's good. And now at this awkward angle, I'm gonna tighten this. Here's another sander that has the locking on this side, and there's another nut on this side so you can adjust the table, make sure it's perfectly square to the sander. You can feel this sandpaper is good stuff. It's very grippy. To keep the sandpaper clean, you can use a tube of silicone. This is from a tube of silicone that went bad. It hardened inside of the tube. You could also use one of those things you get at Harbor Freight that's like it's basically a tube of silicone, but it's yellow, and you clean the disc with it. Now let's go ahead and turn this on and try it out. I forgot just how nice it is to have good sandpaper. Before, this probably would have taken me a lot longer than like 3 seconds just to sand that curve. This is great. Now I can take the silicone and just run it over just like that to get rid of the sandpaper we just put on there. So we just did this on the Harbor Freight Central Machinery disc sander, and we used the Woodstock disc sanding paper. This is 12-inch 80 grit, and so far I'm very happy with it. This is amazing compared to what I had before. It's so much better. You can get 120 grit from Harbor Freight, but really that's 120 grit wears down really fast, especially for the stuff we're going to be using the disc sander for. I think it's worth it to go with 80 grit.